To Lindsey German from the Stop the War Coalition in London. A very good evening to you. Do you know, back at the beginning of March, we'll recall, don't we, Robert Gates was visiting Afghanistan and his conversation with General Petraeus then was accidentally caught on record, much to their embarrassment. You recall that, I'm sure, too. The Pentagon chief was jokingly asked if they were planning strikes on Libya. The answer was, yeah, exactly. You know, back then it was perceived as a joke, but judging by what we're witnessing right now, kind of proves that old expression, many a true word spoken in jest, yeah?
Well, it certainly does, and I think that lots of people who may have been taken in by this idea of the no-fly zone being a relatively cost-free way of Britain and France and the United States intervening in Libya, and now, I think in many cases, having second thoughts. And I can't remember a British military intervention which has so quickly become contested, become unpopular. I mean, what we're seeing here is that a whole number of people, a number of opinion polls are showing that there's a growing opposition to this because people are asking a number of questions. If it is simply a no-fly zone to protect civilians, how come that there have been 4 nights of bombardment? How come that cruise missiles are being used and that obviously civilians are in threat? We don't know exactly how many have been killed, but we know that they're in threat of being killed and wounded. And what exactly is the purpose of this? And I think people are more and more sceptical about it.
Yeah, Lindsey, quite a lot of mixed messages from the top brass. I mean, top officials, especially in the UK, have been really inconsistent, haven't they, over the matter of regime change, i.e. whether they want to see regime change in Libya. It does beg the question, do they actually know what they're doing there?
Well, they obviously do want regime change, but obviously they know that this is beyond the remit of the UN resolution that they got passed, which even when it was passed, as you know, had a number of major countries abstaining, including Germany, which is part of the EU, obviously Russia, China, India and Brazil. So it's absolutely clear that the British Prime Minister, the French President, would like to get rid of Gaddafi, but of course this does open up many difficult questions. They don't really know what they're doing there. They've had real problems within NATO because NATO, up till yesterday, wasn't able to agree about the role that it should play. There is clearly very great disquiet in the Arab League, which obviously didn't think that the no-fly zone, which it agreed to last week, would end up with this amount of fighting. And in Britain itself, there clearly are divisions. And although in the Parliament there was a very big vote, I think a shamefully large vote, to support the intervention in Libya. Actually, even within the original debate, there were many MPs, including on the government side, who were expressing great concern about it and worry that this will spiral out of control, that nobody knows where it is going to end, what will happen if Gaddafi isn't just simply frightened off, which seems to be the original plan, that he would just be frightened by missiles and bombs. If that doesn't happen, and there's absolutely no sign that that is happening, what then is the strategy? And I suppose the real question many people are asking is what on earth are we doing intervening in a third arena in the Middle East and Asia in less than a decade, when the previous 2 wars have been so unsuccessful?
Well, despite the US Defence Secretary's pledge that intensity of strikes will decrease, you touched on this just now, we're seeing more and more forces coming to the region. Are we therefore in for a long war? No point saying we shouldn't have done it. It looks like it's already happening.
Well, I do think there's still a point in saying that we shouldn't have done it, and I'm shortly to go down to Downing Street to make that point along with other protesters tonight. But I think the danger is that the Afghan war has solved absolutely nothing and is mired in all sorts of problems and is deeply unpopular here. The Iraq war was generally considered to have been a disastrous intervention which, far from advancing Western interests, set them back in the Middle East. And now we have a third arena of war in Africa, in North Africa, led by the previous colonial powers. And this is something that more and more people, I think, as they study it and see that actually it isn't going to do what it claimed to do, which is to protect civilians in Libya, will become more and more disenchanted with it.
Why does the US and its allies keep getting involved in disputes and wars like this?
Well, this is the problem that the US has, is that it is a declining power in the world. It's still the major power, but it is a declining power. It faces a number of rivals. It more and more has to intervene militarily in order to protect its interests. But it is clear from this intervention that not just Obama, but a whole number of people at the top of the US government and military are very, very concerned about getting dragged into this. They can see where this may be going. And of course, people are also asking about the double standards. There are many people being killed in Bahrain. There are people being killed across the region. The idea that the Saudi regime, one of the most undemocratic regimes in the world, should be somehow fighting on the side of democracy in Libya when it does absolutely nothing to help its own people is a question that many people will say, what on earth are the priorities of the West? And you have to say the priorities of the West again and again have been found wanting. They're not about genuine democracy. They're about protecting the interests of the West and protecting the resources like oil and gas, which the West wants to get its hands on.
And Lindsey, briefly, if you can, are we any clearer tonight, do you think, about where this intervention is going to lead?
It doesn't seem to me that it's clear at all, but I think that the British and French are getting more and more embroiled in this without any clear idea of what they're doing. And if this becomes another unpopular war, and indeed another very costly war on a day when we've been told in our budget here in Parliament that there is no money for all sorts of welfare that people need, then this will become a very unpopular war very, very quickly indeed.
Lindsey German from the Stop the War Coalition in London, thanks for being on RT tonight.